Good afternoon. This is Joe Mullings.
And this is Holly Scott.
And you are with On the Line. And Holly and I are going to chat about intelligence today being inserted into our medtech devices.
Okay, intelligence in our devices, not how intelligent you and I are. Is that what you mean?
Well, we're intelligent devices.
That's true.
Right?
Could be argued from others, but that's all right. Whole different subject.
Don't invite them into the room.
So intelligent devices,
Intelligent devices, yeah. So, it's interesting is more and more of our clients are involved now with getting data out of their otherwise typically in the past dumb devices. Mm-hmm. Meaning that what can we put a sensor in and gain information out on the patient or the procedure to learn from.
Yes. We're seeing companies become heavily reliant on the clinical function, because that's becoming more and more their magic, right? The more data they collect, the more intelligent they get, the more value they have to the market. It's tremendous. It's a really exciting curve we're seeing.
And it's another revenue stream too.
Oh, absolutely.
And we're seeing that in a lot of places. So one of our favorites is Potrero Medical, run by Joe Urban out in California. I think, so what Potrero does is that they typically use a urometer, Foley catheter that has been around for 30, 40 years. The tech hasn't changed. And I'm just giving you this as an example so you can get it in your mind's eye. Historically, the Foley catheter has been put into the patient in the ICU, CCU setting, and it tries to drain the urine out of the patient. But because of airlocks and the inability for the charge nurse who's always overworked is not able to clear the line. And so Joe and his team have developed an unbelievable tech, but more importantly, it's not your grandpa's Oldsmobile anymore. What they've done is they've come up with an incredibly clever disposable set that has sensors in it, a very unique balloon in it, and I believe they get 5 different metrics now from an indwelling catheter that previously was quote unquote dumb, that now can predict acute kidney injury, which is a $10 billion a year expense to the healthcare market. And that just a year and a half ago was a dumb device sitting in the corner of the ICU, CCU, doing nothing. Yeah,
that's a no-brainer, that application. If they can get that, as we expect them to, towards a successful launch, that giving the physician that kind of information real time with real tangible results that's tremendous.
Yeah, the evidence is there. And we bring this up again because this podcast is less about what you should buy and more about where you want to steer your career.
Exactly.
The thing you have to look at is where is tech going, and we say that a lot, and we know where it is today, but we want to look where it's going. Here's where I forecast is going to occur as you look at being the architect of your own career moving forward and driving it. Historically, the patient monitoring business has been sleepy, boring, in fact, jettisoned off. Edwards sold a large part of their patient monitoring a couple of years back. I think that's prime real estate these days when you start to incorporate this data analytics and adding a smart sensor technology. Why would you not want to own what I call the real estate on the pole in the ICU, CCU setting where you can predict failure or catastrophic events? Oh,
there's no question. That data is becoming incredibly valuable. And even with the teams that are developing the technology from outside of the software, right? We know that these are primarily driven by software. The individuals that are around it, even a mechanical engineer, right? With the other clients, we've got a phenomenal client on the East Coast that's got technology that can get involved with a cardiovascular diagnostic in 10 minutes, what it takes days and multiple tests and everything else to get to. And some of the initial pushback when I'm chatting with people is, well, there's not a lot of challenge to this product development effort because we're just putting what's already out there together and then zapping in the software. If I'm an engineer and I'm really creative, and at the end of the day, you have to step back and say, okay, where is the market going, right? And if we know that this particular area of the market is going in a direction, you at least owe it to yourself to explore it, right? You may not be sitting and designing on the CAD machine like you used to, or thought that you may get your most challenge out of, but at the end of the day, incorporating that software into a tangible device and then packaging it so the FDA can make it palatable and actually approve it, that's still got a lot of meat to it. There's still a lot going on.
Right. And while software is cool and software sort of makes the world go round, mechanical people actually move the world. Right?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
without amazing sensors, without pushing sensor technology, without redesigning, and I wouldn't even call it redesign, without new design of these disposable sets or indwelling devices that have to sit on the patient with the sensor incorporated, that's all brand new mechanical design. That's material engineering. That's electrical engineering on pulling the signal from the sensor to the board and then delivering it to the software engineer. There is so much more than quote unquote software when you're looking at these. Sure, there's the whole machine learning component. I would say, however, that as an ME or a double E or a materials engineer, that you really need, as you pointed out, to give yourself a fair look at what's going on.
Oh, yeah. And let's think outside of engineering for a moment. This has created enormous opportunity for regulatory and clinical. The regulatory professionals that are getting exposure in these software-driven technologies are typically first movers in this
Think
space.
about all the software QA work we're doing right now in this area.
There's so much going on. So that regulatory exposure and getting these technologies, and it could be pushed to PMA. Some of them are, even if they're non-invasive. At the end of the day, there are so many lessons to be learned and so much value that they're getting. And clinicals, my goodness, the clinical. I've talked to some people early in search and say, I don't know, it's just basically monitoring a 10-minute procedure. It's like, do you have any idea that this is going to be the value of the organization, this clinical function? Because this is driving the data. And the data that we get only makes this technology better and better. It's incredible. It's a really unique platform for opportunity.
And look for more and more devices that are indwelling to have to incorporate sensors and the ability to drag data. So we just got contacted
great
a couple
point.
days ago. There's a sleep apnea device that is an indwelling device in the mouth, and it's got a number of sensors in it, and it's pulling biometrics out of the patient and then giving that data to the clinician or the physician and allowing them to preemptively either cure or better treat the patient because you have a massive data set you're pulling out of that. And we have another situation where there's a client who's a $2 billion a year player. They have a major push right now on mechanical electrical software to start embedding sensors and quote unquote smart technology into every single one of their, I think, 15 medical device firms that they own. So from a career perspective, I think what you want to do is, as you go in for an interview or as you look at a medical device company, or any company for that matter, but we're on medical device here and on the line, you want to ask, how are you answering the data analytics side of the business? How are you answering the predictive health? Because if your device is not giving me something more than the obvious use, and not helping a physician or a healthcare provider be predictive in their future care, then I'm not sure I want to work here, because that will be a dinosaur. I mean, I'll totally be historically right on that. There are some that are not going to, but I think you're going to see syringes. I think that you're going to see even a robust number of patient monitoring devices start to have, because you already have the real estate on the patient.
Right, exactly.
So if you already have the real estate on the patient, you're going to start to see acquisitions made of these patient monitoring companies that I want that real estate, so then I can start to put predictive health, because it's beyond the selling of the equipment and the selling of the disposable. The new revenue stream in medtech is the data.
Without doubt. We've seen the importance of it creep up from the early days of diabetes and how the sensors technologies and how important those became. The market is just incredibly large, and that's because that particular disease state is so incredibly large. That's just one.
Yeah, that's a small one.
Yeah, that's it's a large one, but it's just one compared to what else is out there.
But career growth-wise, in other words, I think that's a huge disease. So what I mean by that is the growth trajectory in the introduction of prediction in a medical device. So diabetes has done that for years. They've predicted, they stay ahead of, right, a certain metric. And so that tech isn't going to change much. Maybe the sensor is, it's been the holy grail, I get it, but I'm talking about all the devices that are right now in the market that don't have any predictive in them.
Right. They're going to have to tie into something. They're going to either have to have the capacity or they're going to have to tie into something.
Especially patient monitoring. So for all of you listening in the patient monitoring space or interested in that kind of space, go right now, figure out all of the equipment in the ICU, CCU setting, figure out who all the companies are, and then start to look at them for career opportunities. Because I think that will be the leading edge. The same way that I believe robotics, while it's cool and sexy on the surgical side, I believe, other than ortho right now, robotics will be medical robotics, not surgical robotics, on the diagnostic side.
Medical robotics,
right?
exactly.
Take a repetitive movement done right now by a tech, thousands of times a day, and I think that you're going to see on the diagnostic side that robotics and that data become a lot more of an uptake on companies being built, tech being built, careers and opportunities being had. I would say the same on the patient monitoring side.
Oh, without doubt. The imaging alone, the imaging capabilities, and we've talked about that even with the surgical side, right, on the robotics, and it's that data it will become more valuable than the device itself.
Listen, it's all over the place. 23andMe, we talked about that a couple podcasts back. Sure, you pay $99.99 for the kit. But do you know how much money did you see? I think they just struck a huge deal with a pharmaceutical company in Jersey. I don't know if Caitlin could look that up. 23andMe, the pharmaceutical deal they just struck. So what they're doing is they're selling that DNA data now to the pharmaceutical companies that helps accelerate the clinical trial. Right? And so what you're going to do is you're going to start to see more and more of that data having a post-market value or a predictive ability, because what's happening in healthcare right now is it's going to be the cost of care. So if I can predict something before it happens, and we talked about Potrero with sepsis and AKI, acute kidney injury. You got it for me? Oh, GSK, right, with Glaxo, thanks. Glaxo, that's our research team, crack research team right there. So 23andMe just struck a big contract with GSK on clinical trials. And so if I can head something off of the pass to obviously save a patient's soul, and sometimes more importantly to the bean counters, reduce the hospital's stay for the insurers, and then clear that bed out earlier for the hospital.
Right.
All of that is a win-win-win across the board.
Maps back to success for sure. We see that
Patient,
every
hospital,
time.
insurers, right?
Exactly.
That's the way it's going.
That's the way it's going.
So. Predictive healthcare, data analytics, machine learning, look for the quiet, sleepy, monitoring companies in the ICU, CCU. I'm also forecasting that there's a structure. Ooh, before I go. There's a structural heart company that is making a valve. They're in the Twin Cities.
Okay.
And they are putting a smart technology in the valve itself.
Okay.
I don't want to say who it is yet because I think she swore me to secrecy when we were over in Dublin at the MedTech Strategist Conference. And I believe it's a tunable technology.
It would probably have to be, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
A tunable technology in a heart valve replacement. So my point is these are all smart technologies where classically they've been dumb or inert devices.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
Anyway, I just thought about that. That's
that's
Alzheimer's.
It's interesting though, but it goes back to what you're saying. Every device that touches a patient, it already has the real estate. Get the information.
It's there. It's always on. You just have to figure out. And sensor technologies are accelerating at such a rapid pace right now that we can get things a lot quicker, easier, and more robust and more granular data. And that's where the software engineers then come in. Because if you can't give them that granularity and specificity, they're only as good as the data they get.
Right. And there's a lot of naysayers out there about data and what it could mean and how it can, it's going to turn the world upside down. But at the end of the day, there's so much good that can come from that. There's so much insane information that can be really leveraged to make better decisions about care.
Yeah.
Bottom line, better decisions about patients' care. If I know all of these things versus having so much more limited information. And within the bell curve of humanity, or of this sample of 5,000 patients, this is what you look like. It's more information, and then you can make better decisions. So it's really an interesting trend to watch.
Well, that's another episode of On the Line. I'm Joe Mullings.
And I'm Holly Scott.
We will see you next time. Thanks.